federal agents executed what they are calling the largest coordinated airport security breach takedown in American history. What started as a routine customs flag became a 19-month investigation that would expose a shadow network operating inside one of the nation's busiest international transit hubs. Tonight, we take you inside Operation Blackwing. The shipping container was labeled Industrial Water Filtration Systems, Standard Cargo, Low Priority. It had been sitting in bonded storage at Houston Intercontinental for 11 days, cleared by Senior Logistics Supervisor Marcus Whitfield without secondary verification. But a single anomaly triggered everything. A K-9 unit being rotated through an unscheduled training exercise passed within 40 feet of that container. The dog sat. It wouldn't move. When hazmat teams unsealed the unit under emergency protocol, they found 580 kilograms of fentanyl, enough to kill every man, woman, and child in Texas 14 times over. Vacuum-sealed inside counterfeit water filter cartridges, professionally manufactured, chemically masked, and cleared for release by the same badge number 47 times in the previous 8 months. Marcus Whitfield wasn't a cartel member. He was a 22-year federal employee with a spotless record, a family man, a deacon at his local church, and the key that unlocked a $243 million narcotics corridor that federal investigators would later describe as the most dangerous pipeline we have ever failed to detect. 63 arrests, 4 dead, and a network so embedded in American infrastructure that 3 congressional oversight hearings have already been scheduled. But here's what investigators still cannot explain. Who recruited Whitfield? Why did internal audits flag Terminal 4 7 times in the past 2 years, only for each investigation to be quietly closed? What was stored on the encrypted laptop recovered from a rental car at the airport Marriott? And why, when agents traced communication logs, did one burner phone ping a location inside the Pentagon exactly 14 times? 4 questions, 19 months of surveillance. And what they discovered in the first 6 hours would redefine how America understands cartel infiltration. Keep watching. 4:47 a.m. Central Time. FBI tactical units breached 8 locations simultaneously across the greater Houston metropolitan area. Not sequential, simultaneous. An 87-second window designed to prevent any warning from reaching the next target. Terminal 4 Cargo Processing Center. A private charter hangar on the airport's eastern perimeter, a distribution warehouse in Pasadena, a cold storage facility near the Port of Houston, a residential property in Sugar Land, a law office in the Galleria district, a used car dealership in Humble, and a nonprofit organization headquartered in a downtown Houston high-rise that on paper provided disaster relief supplies to Central America. At Terminal 4, the breach team moved through the employee access corridor with surgical precision. No announcements, no warnings. They needed the computers running. They needed the phones intact. When the first agent cleared the supervisor's office, they found Marcus Whitfield sitting at his desk. He wasn't running. He wasn't hiding. He was waiting. On his desk sat a single manila envelope. Inside it, a handwritten note containing 12 names and 1 sentence. I am not the architect. I am the foundation. Whitfield surrendered without resistance. He asked for water. He asked for a lawyer. And then he said 7 words that sent the investigation spiraling in a direction no one anticipated. Ask them about the January protocol. At the Pasadena warehouse, agents hit the loading bay just as a convoy of unmarked box trucks was preparing to depart. 3 vehicles stopped. 2 drivers fled on foot. 1 truck accelerated directly toward the perimeter fence. A DHS helicopter tracked it for 9 miles before spike strips disabled the vehicle on Interstate 45. Inside that truck, agents found 890 kilograms of cocaine concealed inside industrial air conditioning units. They found 1.2 million counterfeit oxycodone pills, each one containing lethal doses of fentanyl. They found $4.7 million in vacuum-sealed cash, and they found a shipping manifest signed by a name that would appear 17 more times before the night was over. A name that didn't belong to a drug dealer. A name that belonged to a sitting federal aviation administrator. Across all 8 locations within the first 90 minutes, federal agents seized 3.1 tons of narcotics with an estimated street value of $189 million. They seized $14 million in cash and cryptocurrency access keys. They seized 67 firearms, including military-grade weapons that matched serial numbers reported stolen from a National Guard armory in Louisiana 18 months prior. They recovered body armor, 3 sets bearing authentic Department of Homeland Security insignia. They arrested 41 individuals, and in the law office in the Galleria district, they found something that transformed this from a drug investigation into a national security emergency. A server room hidden behind a false wall in the document storage area. Still running, still connected. Containing 11 terabytes of data that would take analysts at FBI headquarters 9 days to fully decrypt. But what they found in the first 3 hours was enough to trigger an immediate escalation. This wasn't a cartel operation. This was an institution. 6 hours later, FBI Cyber Division, Washington, D.C. The first encryption layer fell at 10:23 a.m. Eastern. What populated across 17 analyst screens wasn't a financial ledger. It was a blueprint, a complete organizational architecture mapping 37 months of coordinated infiltration across 6 federal agencies, shell corporations, 44 of them, nested inside legitimate import-export businesses, agricultural equipment suppliers, medical device distributors, and 3 faith-based charities operating across Texas, Louisiana, and Florida. Financial routing through 14 countries: Belize, Panama, Cyprus, the Cayman Islands, Switzerland, Singapore, then back into American accounts disguised as consulting fees, real estate investments, and political campaign contributions. They designated it internally Operation Iron Gate. The structure was elegant in its brutality. Product originated from Sinaloa manufacturing facilities in Culiacan and Durango. Shipments moved through legitimate Mexican commercial freight carriers to avoid cartel-flagged transportation networks. Cargo entered the United States at 3 primary points: Houston Intercontinental, Dallas-Fort Worth, and a private airfield outside Laredo operating under agricultural exemption permits. The product cleared customs under pre-authorized security codes, codes that could only be generated by personnel with Level 4 federal clearance or above. The proceeds flowed backward through the shell network, laundered across 14 jurisdictions, and returned to American soil as clean investment capital. One analyst, a 16-year veteran named Patricia Delgado, later testified that she had to leave her workstation for 10 minutes, not because of the scale, because of the precision. In 16 years of financial forensics, she reportedly said, "I have tracked dirty money across 4 continents. I have never seen architecture this clean. This wasn't criminal enterprise. This was engineering." And then they found the personnel file, not names, badge numbers, 23 badge numbers with corresponding payment records stretching back 31 months, monthly deposits ranging from $8,000 to $47,000. Each payment routed through a different shell corporation. Each payment timed to coincide with specific cargo clearances. 14 badge numbers belonged to Transportation Security Administration personnel. 4 belonged to Customs and Border Protection officers. 3 belonged to Immigration and Customs Enforcement agents. 1 belonged to Marcus Whitfield. And 1 badge number, the highest payment tier at $47,000 monthly, belonged to someone identified only by a code designation: Condor. Let me ask you something. Who do you think Condor is? Hold that thought, because the answer arrives in the next 90 seconds, and it's worse than you're imagining. 5:58 a.m., Joint Operations Command Center, San Antonio. The tactical display showed 67 red markers pulsing across 4 states: Texas, Louisiana, New Mexico, Oklahoma. This was no longer a Houston operation. This was a regional dismantling. 1,400 federal agents activated, 74 tactical teams, 23 helicopters. DEA strike units sweeping distribution corridors along Interstate 10, Border Patrol tactical units hitting crossing points from El Paso to Brownsville, ATF teams targeting weapons caches identified through the server data, and U.S. Marshals executing arrest warrants on 17 individuals whose names had never appeared in any law enforcement database until 6 hours ago. The coordinated strikes continued through sunrise. A methamphetamine super lab operating inside an abandoned meatpacking facility outside Midland, producing 600 kilograms weekly, destroyed in 11 minutes. A cartel logistics compound in the Rio Grande Valley. 8 senior Sinaloa coordinators arrested, including 2 with outstanding warrants from Mexican federal authorities. A tunnel network beneath a commercial trucking facility in Laredo, 410 meters in length, equipped with electric rail transport, climate control, and surveillance countermeasures, documented and demolished. A human trafficking way station outside McAllen, 63 victims recovered, 14 of them minors. Some had been held for weeks awaiting transport to destinations across the American South. A weapons depot in an Albuquerque storage facility, 340 firearms, 40 kilograms of plastic explosives, night vision equipment and encrypted communication devices consistent with military special operations gear, total seizures across all coordinated operations, 9.7 tons of narcotics, $84 million in cash, assets, and cryptocurrency. 412 arrests spanning 4 states, 203 firearms, 19 vehicles modified for smuggling operations, and enough fentanyl to produce approximately 47 million lethal doses. Senior FBI commanders declared Operation Iron Gate a historic success. 412 arrests, nearly 10 tons of poison removed from American streets. Whitfield in custody, network dismantled. Victory. Except it wasn't victory. Because what analysts found in the final partition of that Houston server changed everything they thought they understood. Condor wasn't a cartel liaison. Condor wasn't a foreign operative. Condor was retired Lieutenant General Victor Ashworth, former Deputy Commander of Joint Task Force North, holder of active top-secret security clearance with sensitive compartmented information access. The man who had personally redesigned federal cargo inspection protocols at 17 American airports following September 11th. The man who had testified before Congress 14 times on border security vulnerabilities. The man whose recommendations had shaped every major transportation security policy implemented in the past 2 decades. Victor Ashworth hadn't infiltrated the system. Victor Ashworth had built the system, and then he had sold the blueprints to the highest bidder. This next part requires your complete attention, because this is where a drug investigation becomes something else entirely. The server files contained what analysts would later classify as an insurance archive. 340 gigabytes of documentation assembled not by federal investigators, but by Ashworth himself. Protection, leverage, a dead man's switch. The contents were systematic and devastating. 31 law enforcement officers across 6 Texas cities, names, badge numbers, payment records, recorded telephone conversations. 11 Border Patrol agents with documented route manipulation during known smuggling windows. Patrol schedules adjusted, sensor equipment mysteriously malfunctioning. Shift supervisors who never questioned why certain corridors went unmonitored during specific overnight hours. 6 federal judges across Texas and Louisiana. Case dismissals, suppressed evidence, sentences reduced to time served. One judge in Houston had presided over 23 narcotics cases in the past 2 years. Exposed. 19 of those cases involved defendants with documented Sinaloa connections. Exposed. Exposed, 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 exposed. Average sentence among those 19 cases, 14 months. 4 sitting members of the Texas state legislature. Campaign contributions traced through shell corporations back to cartel-laundered funds. Policy positions on border security that suddenly softened after payments began. One representative who had publicly championed expanded truck inspection requirements withdrew his support 3 weeks after receiving $340,000 through a construction company that existed only on paper. Internal DEA raid schedules leaked to cartel contacts 72 hours in advance on at least 11 documented occasions. Evidence that disappeared from 3 separate federal facilities. Witnesses who recanted testimony after visits from individuals who were never identified. At a federal courthouse in Houston, a veteran DEA agent watched his former partner escorted out in handcuffs. He had worked beside that man for 9 years. They had served as best man at each other's weddings. He said nothing to reporters. He sat in his vehicle in the parking structure for 40 minutes before driving away. This wasn't corruption, the lead FBI commander stated during a classified congressional briefing 3 days later. This was colonization. They didn't just buy individuals. They purchased infrastructure. They built a parallel system operating inside our own institutions. One that answered to Culiacan, not Washington. General Ashworth was arrested at his residence in Fair Oaks Ranch at 7:12 a.m. He was reading the newspaper on his patio. He offered the arresting agents coffee. He asked if he could finish his crossword puzzle. When they declined, he smiled and said 4 words. "You found one network." The investigation expanded beyond Texas borders within 72 hours. Trucking routes operating under falsified agricultural permits moved product north through Oklahoma, Kansas, Missouri, and into Chicago distribution networks. Port contacts in Houston, New Orleans, and Mobile with compromised inspection personnel. Shipping manifests altered at origin points in Mexico and Central America. Way stations along major interstate corridors that experienced scheduled maintenance outages during known convoy transit windows. This network moved an estimated 4.8 tons of narcotics weekly across 14 states without triggering a single federal interdiction for 37 months. Marcus Whitfield was formally charged with 41 federal counts, including narcotics trafficking, conspiracy, and acting as an agent of a foreign criminal organization. He faces life imprisonment without possibility of parole. General Victor Ashworth was charged with espionage, racketeering, money laundering, and 17 additional counts that remain sealed for national security reasons. His security clearance was revoked. His military pension was frozen. His name was added to a very short list of American general officers charged with betraying their country. 412 cartel members and associates were in federal custody. The tunnels were sealed. The shell companies were frozen. The network was dismantled. Justice had been served. The system had worked. America was safer. Or so the official statement claimed. Because buried in the final encrypted partition of that Houston server, inside a folder that analysts almost overlooked, was a single document dated 11 days before the K9 unit made that accidental discovery. The folder was labeled Genesis. Inside it were architectural plans for 3 new operational corridors, 3 new airports, 3 new sets of compromised personnel, 3 new shadow networks already in recruitment phase. The Iron Gate hadn't been destroyed. It had been replicated. Ashworth's network was Generation 1. Generation 2 was already operational in cities federal investigators hadn't begun to suspect, and the document contained one final notation, a list of code names for the 3 individuals managing these new corridors: Raven, Monarch, Sentinel. None of those names appeared in any federal database. None of those names matched any known cartel associates. None of those names had been spoken by any of the 412 individuals currently in federal custody. They didn't just infiltrate our airports. They built a franchise model, and we only found the flagship location. The human cost of this network cannot be measured in tons seized or arrests made. In Texas alone, 2,847 overdose deaths were recorded last year. 64% involved fentanyl that forensic analysis traced back to supply chains connected to Operation Iron Gate. 63 victims were recovered from that McAllen transit house. but investigators believe more than 400 individuals were processed through that network over a 30-month period. Most remain unaccounted for. Their families may never know what happened to them. One father from Katy, whose 17-year-old daughter died from a single fentanyl-laced pill she believed was Xanax, testified before a congressional subcommittee. She was a straight-A student, he said. She made one mistake. Someone in a federal uniform decided that her life was worth less than a clearance code. That pill traveled through an airport checkpoint authorized by people sworn to protect American citizens. That pill came from a shipment cleared through Terminal 4. Authorized by Marcus Whitfield, protected by Victor Ashworth, enabled by a system that valued profit over people at every single checkpoint along the way. This is not just a crime story. This is an autopsy of institutional failure. It happened in Texas. It is happening somewhere else right now. And the next generation of networks is already learning from these mistakes, already adapting, already recruiting the next Marcus Whitfield, the next Victor Ashworth, the next badge willing to look the other way for the right price. Power doesn't require violence. Sometimes it only requires silence. A clearance code, a timestamp, a signature on a manifest that no one will ever read twice. The infrastructure of American security was designed to protect us, but infrastructure is only as reliable as the people operating it. And some of those people have already been purchased. If you made it this far, you understand what most people refuse to see. Share this with someone who believes corruption only happens in other countries. Comment below if you want these investigations to continue. Because the 3 cities identified in the Genesis file are still operational: Houston, Chicago, and one major West Coast port facility that processes more international cargo than any other location in the Western Hemisphere. That story, the next generation of the Iron Gate, the hunt for Raven, Monarch, and Sentinel, drops next week. Subscribe now, because if you miss what comes next, you'll miss the name that connects everything, and that name belongs to someone still sitting in a position of federal authority. Right now, as you're watching this.